Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm Ida Maybon of LightCycleAstrology.com. Today we are doing Venus retrograde horoscopes for all 12 rising signs. We're going to take a look at over the next couple of weeks as Venus is moving retrograde in the sign of Leo. Where in particular is this landing in your personal birth chart based on your rising sign? So we'll get into that today and do some concrete delineations for you that will hopefully give you an idea about what to expect for this upcoming Venus retrograde over the next couple of weeks. Before we get into it, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit notifications so you don't miss any videos. Leave me some comments. Whatever you are comfortable sharing in the comment section is really great to hear. It's going to be a really interesting Venus retrograde, so I look forward to seeing how you guys experience this. And don't forget, you can always go to lightcycleastrology.com if you feel like you need more personal guidance other than I provide for free here on the content with this channel. So you can check that out if you're interested in a consultation, and it only takes about a week to see me. Okay, well, let's get right into it. We'll pull up the real-time clock and we'll take a look at Venus's retrograde or entrance into retrograde motion here that really is beginning a couple of days ago as Venus is slowing down to a station. You see July the 22nd, I have the clock set to, and here's this little S denoting that Venus is essentially stopped in the sky. She almost makes it out of Leo, but doesn't quite make it. And one thing that is really, really interesting about this Venus retrograde in particular is if I go forward to July the 23rd, we have the sun's entrance into the sun's temple of Leo. So one big part of this Venus retrograde that is actually pretty positive is that we have a planet that is falling back into retrograde motion, which in ancient astrology is typically a pretty negative thing. But we have the support of the sun that comes in as the domicile host of Venus and almost symbolizes somebody coming along and sort of catching you as you fall. You know, it's like Venus is on the king's throne and she falls off due to vanity, pride, or just some general misfortune. But the king comes back into his own temple right at that moment and is able to sort of catch her and support her. So one thing about the Venus retrograde period this time around, I think, is that at least as this starts off, you have a lot of support, even though there may be misfortune. So we will talk about that a little bit more in general. Now, another thing that is really, really interesting about this Venus retrograde in particular, I'm going to pull up my astronomy program here, which I do from time to time, and I want to show you something else that is happening at the same moment, which is just very fascinating to me. You also have the fixed star Regulus in the picture. So I have Venus right in the center of the screen here, and I have Venus's orbit on, and these green lines running across and up and down, these are the ecliptical longitude and latitude lines. I've got the real-time clock for the astronomy program back at July the 10th, and if I move the clock forward by days, I want to show you Venus's motion as she enters retrograde. So I'm going to go forward by days here, and you can see that she heads towards Regulus, but then she begins to move sideways and to the right. I hope you can see that on the screen. And then she enters retrograde motion. Let me show this to you one more time here. So we'll go back to July the 10th. Venus is heading towards Regulus, this fixed star in the sky, who is actually at 0 degrees of Virgo in the in zodiacal degrees. But you see, here comes Venus right around July the 20th, making her closest proximity to Regulus. And this is the exact moment that she basically is stopped in the sky. You'll see here is the moon also coming through right at the same time. This is a major, major, major omen, in my opinion. You have the moon, you have a fixed star that is used in astrology for context, and you also have Venus, a planet that is very importantly stationing to turn retrograde right at this moment when all of these things are lining up. So what could be the significance of that? I think what this really represents is that Regulus as a fixed star, one of the ancient 4 royal stars. If you look Regulus up in the ancient literature, there are a few different interpretations, and one of the significations of Regulus is that it can sometimes represent things that come to power or have a lot of ambition to gain or procure a certain amount of power or authority. And then sometimes there is a fall from that power due to a misuse of authority or power or a corruption or something like that, something due to vanity. So oftentimes Regulus can be a star that is connected with people that have a great drive. They want to succeed. They want to do really great things. But when things are not done in ethical ways or they are overdone, there are times where Regulus can signify that there is some kind of fall from power or a position of authority. And this is a really big omen for me that Venus is also running through the sign in Leo here and stationing, being pulled back into that retrograde motion right at the time that she is making this very close proximity to a fixed star that can also represent the rise of power and also the fall from power. We have some support again from the sun's entrance and co-presence while Venus turns retrograde, hopefully catching Venus if she is going through particular hardships or misfortunes. But we also definitely have in my opinion, we have a very clear signature that says, hey, if there is something that has been overdone, if there has been an abuse of power, there almost certainly will be a fall or moving away from that. Okay, well, let's go ahead now and we'll begin the horoscopes by placing Aries on the ascendant here. And if you are an Aries rising, this is going to mean that Venus is retrograding through your fifth house. And the fifth house is an interesting place because some of the meaning that is derived for the fifth house has to do with the fact that it is 120 degrees. It is a trine away from the ascendant. So this trine aspect that it has to the ascendant degree was thought to be related to the essence of Jupiter, and Jupiter has that reproductive kind of quality to it. So you get the topics of children, but really, not everybody has children, but almost everybody has things in their lives that are recreations of themselves. So the fifth house is really getting at how do we recreate ourselves, usually in our own image. What's interesting about having a Venus retrograde go through this house is that a fifth house being occupied by the sign of Leo shares a little bit of that same kind of theme, because Leo is also a sign that, because of when it happens seasonally in the year, it is also getting at a type of legacy. We get themes that are connected to the king, and the king is always concerned with how does he pass on his throne to the next one in line to the throne, right? There's always, like, what did they call it? The heir and the spare, right? The king is always in a certain way, sort of thinking ahead and preparing for that moment where he needs to pass on the central role of authority to a progeny. So both Leo and the fifth house have these things in common. So one thing that you might see is that there are topics coming up around some kind of reversal of fortune that either has to do with things that are happening to your children, or it might be around creative things that you're working on that might bring legacy to you one day. So that's one way in which you might see Venus beginning to shift or change things in your life during the retrograde motion, is that you might be noticing things that are changing within the lives of your children or within things that you creatively work on. Now, what's interesting, though, is that with the sun entering Leo right as Venus is stationing retrograde, I wonder if, in the case that we are witnessing our children maybe going through some kind of misfortune or setback, I wonder if we don't represent that sun entering Leo right at that particular moment to sort of catch Venus turning retrograde. So could we be the sun character ready to support and catch our children if they go through some kind of hardship or reversal or misfortune or something like that? Another way in which we could see Venus retrograde in the fifth is simply reconnecting with children. If this is something that has been missing from our lives and we feel like we need to reconnect with them, Venus retrogrades obviously are usually about reconciliations at some point with people that we have relationships with. So this could have something to do with a reconciliation with our children or them reconciling with us. Very typical and classic Venus retrograde kinds of themes here. Now, this could also have to do with the way that we take or enjoy pleasure as well. The fifth house has always been connected to pleasure. And one thing that you have to watch out for is, I think, the omen of Venus stationing retrograde near Regulus, that over abuse of power, or that lust that may be followed by a fall from grace. You get the sense that you want to be careful about ways in which you indulge too much, spending too much money, drinking too much, entertaining in a way that is just not good in the long run, casual sex or anything like that, that just will have kind of a negative or downside after the enjoyment is gone. So, for instance, if you decide to go gambling right now, that Venus stationing retrograde near Regulus could really be quite a big loss. You put all your money on the bet and you lose, and Venus is representing that reversal of fortune for you. But it could be, just your body breaking down from being in that habit of just having a little bit too much to drink every day, or whatever it is. This might also be a time where there is just some loss around a pastime that you find pleasurable. For instance, maybe having to sell off the pool table that's in the rec room in your house to make room for maybe a new baby that's coming or something like that. Likewise, though, on the flip side of maybe losing a recreational activity or something that's enjoyable that you may have to adjust around, this could also be a time where you revisit something that used to be something you did recreationally. So, like, let's say that you used to go out and hang out with friends after work every day and play, soccer in the park or something like that. And it's been a long time since you've done that. This could be a time where there could be something that you're revisiting or going back to a pastime that had something to do with recreation or enjoyment or fun. So these are some of the things I could see for Venus retrograde in the fifth house if you are an Aries rising. I do know someone that is an Aries rising, and they are planning a bachelor party at this time. And this person is married and has been for many years, has children and all of that. So it's interesting that this Venus retrograde seems to be showing up for them as kind of this return to almost like a lifestyle that predated marriage and children and all those responsibilities. It's like there's some kind of hearkening back to a previous time that was more carefree. So there is that sort of carefree kind of shift or change potentially around recreation or fun or enjoyment. There is potentially that fall from grace on the shadow side where you might overindulge and it might come back to haunt you. And then, of course, we could be, looking at how we reconnect with children or support children at this time. So that is what I have for Aries risings. Somewhere in those particular house topics, you might see something showing up for you if you are in Aries rising. Okay, now let's move to Taurus rising. If you are Taurus rising, Venus is retrograding through your fourth house, a place that is connected to home or family, the parents, and also living situations, and in particular, the father. So one thing that really stands out for me if you're a Taurus rising is the fact that you have the symbolism of the sun entering the fourth house right as Venus is also stationing retrograde. It makes me wonder if there isn't going to be like, your father coming to visit, or maybe even your father moving in, or if there isn't something happening in your father's life, like a reversal of fortune or misfortune. Hopefully not, but maybe something like your father becoming ill or something like that. So I wonder about things connected to your father in particular, but of course it might be extended to other family members or parents just in general. With Venus retrograde in the fourth house, of course, we always usually get into that territory of figuring out how to relate to people at home or in the family. But in particular, I wonder about things like parenting with Taurus rising, because Venus is also, for Taurus rising ascendants, Venus is also your ascendant ruler. So there's a little bit more of a personal connection with what Venus is doing, what she's working out, maybe the misfortune that she is encountering. And it's like, how are you personally relating to the home environment at this time, or to people in the family at this time? Are there people moving in? Are there people moving out? Are you having to establish some kind of authority as maybe like a parent that is having to be a disciplinarian and figuring out the balance between doing it lovingly, but also, needing to do it a little bit more strongly? There could be themes like that, especially with Venus retrograde in the sign of Leo, the sign of the king, where there's an emphasis on authority or power. So with that connection to Regulus, we could be exploring how to not go overboard if we need to bring in some kind of personal authority for us personally within the dynamic of the home situation or living environment. So that's one thing that I could see for Venus retrograde in the fourth house. There could be also other things like the loss of a house or property, needing to move, or a house falling into disrepair or something like that. A loss or turning away from something pleasing that we do in our private time. A loss of inheritance or something connected to heritage. And also, this could be just general unsureness about what to do with a particular circumstance in our living situation. So, those are some of the things that you could see with Venus retrograde in the fourth house. So I'm pretty curious to see if you are Taurus rising. I would love for you guys to drop some comments and let me know how you're noticing this. Okay, well, let's go ahead now and we'll put Gemini onto the ascendant here and roll the real-time clock forward. And there we see that Venus is going to be moving retrograde in your third house. So unlike Taurus risings, where we saw just a minute ago, this is a house that is not what's called an angular house. This is a house that is not either the first, the 10th, the 7th, or the 4th. So those four houses right there, called angular houses, those are typically more active houses. So when we see Venus retrograde in the third, this might be a bit of a more subtle place to recognize the energies of Venus going retrograde. But one of the things that I could see for this topically is that, especially because Leo is one of those fixed signs for Gemini risings, could that expectation of regularity that surrounds the routine or everyday schedule that you follow, you could get into a rut if you are a Gemini rising having a fixed house for your third house. It has to do with the normal, comings and goings and activity that happens in the day that the third house typically is associated with. So one thing that I wonder is if there is, we often talk about breakups with Venus retrograde, but I wonder if the breakup here for Gemini is the breakup of particular routines or things that we normally do. So is there something changing somewhere in your life that is causing some kind of disruption or breakup in the normalcy or the expected routine that you're having that is going to be pulling you out of a rut for some time? But of course, we could also see a loss of things we like to do daily, things that we always take pleasure in. Maybe there's something that we can no longer do as an activity, and we're experiencing a loss from that, which is sometimes frustrating. And this could also be the beginning of new routines that will develop something for us that may have a connection with a routine of beauty care or maintenance, or getting in touch with relatives or family members and getting back into the habit of, staying closer with them or something like that. We could, of course, see the reconciliations with relatives, sisters, siblings, with Venus retrograde in the third, maybe just somebody that you see from time to time in your daily environment, in your normal activity. And this could also be reconnecting and helping out or receiving help from a sibling, relative, or partner. Again, the sun entering Leo right at the time that Venus stations retrograde may be representing that there is some support that is coming in to handle some misfortune. So you might be the person that is supporting a relative or sister or family member, or there might be a relative or sister or family member that is coming in to support you if there's something changing in the everyday environment. So this is really interesting. There is there are things that are generally changing or shifting around just those normal everyday routines, is the way that I would look at a little bit more of the subtle energy if you're a Gemini rising, if you have a Venus retrograde in the third house. Okay, so let's go ahead now and we'll put Cancer on the ascendant. I'll roll the real-time clock forward here. And this is going to show us that Venus retrograde is happening for Cancer ascendant rising signs in the second house. A very, very interesting place to have a Venus retrograde. Usually, the first thing that we are going to naturally associate with the Venus retrograde in the second house, of course, is some kind of reversal in what we value. And typically, this is going to have some connection with those material kinds of things. So, this could be a reversal in fortune around how you earn money, how you save money, how you invest money. This could be something, surrounding your paycheck or a job. But this could also be some kind of return to a skill that you used to have. I do know somebody that is a Cancer rising, and I thought it was really interesting that they were getting back into an activity that they used to do. They used to have a lot of skill in, and it's like sometimes you just see those skills coming back to you, and you're going to be maybe doing something that down the road will lead to some kind of monetization or investment or some practice of skill that is valuable somehow. So it's like, what comes in that's like, oh, that's really valuable and I haven't been doing that. That could be something that is coming up right now. There could also be a loss of a personal assistant sometimes with the Venus retrograde in the second house. The second house was connected with people that are like personal assistants that help you do things that you don't have time to do or that you can't do. So, if you have, like, for instance, like an accountant, this could be a time where it's like, oh, all of a sudden you're having to file your own business tax returns or something, something just mundane like that. But of course, we could see variation in the loss of money or assets. Possessions that you really desire or love could be, kind of coming into the mix here, especially if they're like luxury kinds of items. So, of course, this could be like things that you really want that are maybe not necessary or maybe more of a luxury kind of a thing, more of a desire towards things that you really want or love. And could there be something that is happening circumstantially that is somehow limiting or holding off you from having those material things that you want? That sometimes can be the case with Venus retrograde in the second house. So it can also extend to things like just having that sense of personal authority about, I can afford this, I have the money to do that. And if we need to curb the budget or, make changes in our finances, sometimes there's this feeling like it's like, oh, I don't have my own, I can't just go out and do the thing that I want to do and get that sense of like empowerment because, I have the ability to do it. So this might be more about almost like a feeling where, because you have to change something in the budget or change something that you have invested in or, something that you have to spend money on, it's like, now there's a sense of loss of personal ability to go out there and do things you want to do or be who you want to be. Sometimes that can be something that comes up with Venus retrograde in the second as well. So a change around what you have always collected or held is also something that may be coming into the mix. So an example of this is like, let's say that you've been a long-term investor in a particular stock. Venus retrograde in the second might be saying, this stock has always paid off. It's always been slowly increasing, and I've been watching it over the many, many years. And something's happening to it, and maybe I need to take a look at investing in something different, or maybe I need to sell off something that I've been a long time holder of as an asset or something like that. So those are some possibilities for me when I think about Venus going retrograde in the second house. Okay, well, let's go ahead now and put Leo on the ascendant. If you are a Leo rising, Venus is going retrograde in the first house of self. So a couple of things come to mind with Venus retrograde in the first house. Because Venus is stationing retrograde in the sign of Leo in conjunction with the fixed star Regulus, this really reminds me of something I heard Joe Rogan talk about one time, where he was explaining that as a comedian, sometimes you have to wade into waters where you're unsure whether your comedy is clever and funny or is inappropriate and sometimes mean-spirited. So with Leo risings, Leo is a sign that tends to be a big personality type that tends to put themselves out there as a personality, has a big heart and so forth. And through no fault of your own, sometimes that big personality can sometimes get into territory that might be eliciting some kind of negative feedback. So It might be that you haven't done anything wrong, but just being yourself. But somehow being yourself might be somehow stirring things up or stepping on others' toes, and it might be causing some kind of projected negative reaction from somebody out in the environment. So there could be initially kind of the weakening around personal identity or personal agency or power. And so you might go through the beginning period of some kind of personal reevaluation of yourself as a relational being, or within the context of a partnership. How do you behave as a person within a partnership or something like that? But again, it may not be because you've done anything wrong. It might just be because you're being yourself. But that interesting connection to the conjunction with the fixed star Regulus might be about something going too far or shining too brightly, and then having to pull itself back in some sense, or feeling like there is kind of a rise and then a fall of some sort. So there could be that unsureness right now about identity, personal agency, or power, especially because Venus is retrograde in the sign of Leo. But of course, we could see a reversal in fortune around things beginning for you as well. That's another signature of a retrograde planet in the first house. The first house often is a place we see things beginning for us in our lives. If there's something that really has been building some kind of momentum behind it, this could be that moment where it feels like the wave is sort of past and you lose that momentum for at least a little while. And that can feel frustrating, of course. And you get different themes, like, let's say, moving from somebody that goes to yoga and practices yoga into somebody that decides they want to become yoga within themselves or their identity. They want to get certified and become an instructor and be more identified with something. So those are themes that stand out for me. Also, with a retrograde planet in the first, sometimes that can signal just a fall back into some kind of health issue or sickness. So those are some themes that stand out for me for Leo rising. Okay, let's go ahead now and put Virgo on the ascendant. If you are a Virgo rising, this is placing Venus retrograde into the 12th house. And this is a place that is associated with isolation, or things that are lost, or things that are in our blind spot. And this is because the 12th house doesn't see the ascendant here. So you do get those standout themes of relationships that are sometimes lost or fall away. But it doesn't necessarily have to be something like that. Sometimes we could just go through a period where we get away from our relationship for a little while. For instance, I know somebody that is leading an all women's retreat right now. So they're sort of, they might be having an isolated moment away from a relationship. And it's interesting that a retreat sort of fits into that 12th house kind of realm here as well. And of course, with Leo, you get things like leadership. So they're leading an all women's retreat. So it doesn't have to be outright negative, but you do tend to get those 12th house themes of things that are happening behind your back or are in the shadows, things that you get the term like frenemies. People doing stuff that you're not aware of. So you have to be a little bit careful of that and watch out for things like unscrupulous temptations. This could definitely be the kind of transit where you're tempted in infidelity, or tempted to do something behind a partner's back, or you discover that a partner has been doing something behind your back. It doesn't have to be the worst case scenario. It could just be, one of those classic examples where, let's say your partner really wants to buy something expensive and you guys have talked about it, and you have let it be known that you don't think it's a good idea. This could be the time where they just go out and buy that thing behind your back and you don't know about it. So it doesn't have to be anything outright terrible or bad in terms of like losing a relationship altogether. It could just be something like that. But of course, we do have sometimes the fall from one's own personal authority due to some kind of abuse of power. We get that strong theme here because of that connection with Venus stationing retrograde in conjunction to the fixed star Regulus, where the fixed star Regulus is connected to the rise to power and then the fall away from power due to some kind of corruption or something going too far. So this is definitely one of those signatures where you want to be careful about pride, Be careful about being too arrogant or coming off as all-knowing or authoritative. Or self-important or better than other people. Especially with Venus retrograde, this could be like seeing yourself as more beautiful or popular or somehow consumed by vanity. Those things could lead to some kind of fall here. And we all do that from time to time. Sometimes we just get a little bit ahead of ourselves and we don't see how we have like kind of a certain bravado that's coming off of us. So for Virgo rising, that is one of the pitfalls to watch out for. Is just anything involving, our pride or coming off as all-knowing or too authoritative or self-important or something like that could bring that kind of symbolism of a fall from power or a fall from authority. This could also be feeling almost like the opposite too, where Venus stations and turns retrograde, and it's like we feel like we're losing the love of ourselves, or like we're somehow unlovable, especially for Virgo risings who are very self-critical of themselves at times. This could be like being very critical about, are you beautiful enough? So you want to be careful not to feel like you're losing your beauty or your worth or your self-value or something like that. And if that is something that you feel, this could be a period where you're entering into some kind of recovery around those things. So those are some of the ways in which you might get Venus retrograde showing up for Virgo if you're Virgo risings. Okay, let's go ahead now and put Libra on the ascendant. If you are a Libra rising, this is one of the two rising signs that is a Venus-ruled rising sign. So this could be a little bit more of one of those personal connections to the 11th house that you have, because Venus is going retrograde in this place. So this stands out for me as a reversal in fortune for you personally as you relate to friends or within groups or organizations. So for some reason, this could have more of a personal connection with how you are relating with people in groups or organizations that you belong to. With that theme of Venus stationing retrograde within the range of the fixed star of Regulus, that those symbolic themes of Regulus having to do sometimes with people that are aspiring for something great in their lives, and then sometimes suffer falls from grace or power because they overstep their bounds in some way. So this is definitely one of those transits that you want to be a little bit careful about, just the way that you are treating friends, and you just want to make sure that you aren't somehow overstepping the boundaries within friendships or overstepping the boundaries within the groups or organizations that you are involved with, because that could be where you get yourself into a little bit of trouble here. But this also could be somehow a reversal in fortune around the resources or assets that are provided by the 10th house. And that's because the 11th house is the derivative second house of the 10th. So you get the resources of the company that you work for is the 11th house. So if you're expecting some kind of like raise or promotion or something like that, if you're maybe moving from one place within the company to another or something like that, there could be reversals in fortune around expectations that you've been hoping for. You could see just in general, like people leaving particular social groups or walking away from particular groups of friends, or leaving organizations that they belong to. This reminds me of like an extreme example of this is those shows that you watch where people leave Scientology or some religious group, something like that. This could also have to do with personal aspirations for the future. The 11th house tends to represent those places that we're aiming towards in terms of personal success or professional success. So if we've been aiming in a certain direction for a while, Venus retrograde in the 11th could represent the fact that our aim is somehow changing or shifting to another goal or aspiration that we want to head towards. This could also be sometimes the hopes or dreams of children come into the 11th house. So for people that are trying to have children or wanting to get pregnant, sometimes Venus retrograde in the 11th can have to do with a setback within that. Now, of course, Venus is going to station direct in Leo after September and then move forward through Leo. So Anything that feels like a setback, anything that feels like a loss of opportunity might just be initially a setback for the next couple of months. So not to worry if you are hoping for something and it seems as though it's not going to happen. It could just be that it's not particularly the right time for something that you're hoping for it to happen right now. So those are some things I see for Libra if you are a Libra rising. Okay, let's go ahead now and put Scorpio on the ascendant. If you are a Scorpio rising, this is placing Venus retrograde into the 10th house, a place that is very connected to the public appearance and reputation of us. It also has a connection to the workplace. So, what is shifting or changing? Reversals in fortune around the workplace or daily activity that we take in a professional capacity or to our reputation. So, we definitely get themes that there is some kind of reversal in fortune that has to do with our personal reputation as a professional or something like that. So, there are a lot of possibilities with this. We could have, of course, things changing within our jobs. We could have to be changing jobs at this time. One interesting thing that is probably not happening to most Scorpio risings, but that does seem to come up in the literature associated with the fixed star Regulus is scandal. So this makes me wonder about when you combine Venus with Regulus, if there are potentials for scandal happening in the professional sphere or the workplace environment. And this might not be happening with you personally. It might be happening to the company or to the boss or something like that. But this is definitely a time where you want to be careful about people taking you the wrong way. This has the potential for things like sexual harassment or something taking something the wrong way at work and sort of leading you into some kind of scandal. But just in general, there could be just the overall unsureness or weakening of professional success that is happening. Which sounds really negative, but we have to remember that Venus is going retrograde until September, and then she will station and turn direct and go back through Leo on her way to Virgo. So one thing that is helpful to remember is that this, whatever Venus retrograde is signifying at the time, it's just a setback initially, or the activity might be waning or being lost just momentarily over the next couple of months, and then it's going to be regained in some way as Venus travels back through Leo on her way to Virgo. So that's something to keep in mind. Of course, there could be something like the changing around what we desire for ourselves professionally. There could be themes like, well, I'm not sure I really want to do this anymore. I'm much more called to work in this capacity or work for this company, or I have an interest in becoming involved with this professionally or something like that. Another thing that sometimes will come around with Venus retrograde in the 10th is things that are related to our marital status. Being married or being in relationship is definitely connected to our status within society. So the 10th house is connected to ways that we hold status or rank within society, ways that are publicly viewed. Who are we, and where do we rank among colleagues or anything like that within a public sphere. So, of course, when you're married, you have that sort of married status and people know you as somebody that's married. So with Venus retrograde, could something be changing in relationship that has an effect on your status publicly? That's also something that comes to mind. In cases that people are involved in legal matters, this could also be a judgment that is lost in your favor. That's because the 10th house is associated with judgment at times. So you do want to be careful if you are entering something legal at this time. This could not be the time where advantageous judgments are made in your favor with Venus retrograde. So you want to be careful of that as well. And, just in general, there could be a stagnation towards progress. I'll tell you something personal about Scorpio rising because that is my ascendant sign. On the 20th, I was I was working and I began to have stomach pain, and I thought I was just having like an indigestion or like a food poisoning. Well, I sort of suffered through the day, and I hoped that I would sleep, and then I would wake up the next day and the pain would be gone or whatever. And when I woke up, it was actually more intensified. I worked that day as well, but it ended up that by the end of that work day on the 20th, which was Thursday, right as Venus was making her closest proximity to Regulus, the pain was so centralized in my stomach, and it just was so apparent that it was something serious. So I ended up going to the emergency room, and I suspected that I was having an appendicitis, and I was right. And so within hours, I went from, this is so crazy, this story. I went from, I'm currently building a new house. I have a new child. I still have a full-time job, even though I'm a professional astrologer. I do full-time work as well to support my family. And within a matter of hours, I went from being this incredibly strong familial provider who not only works professionally out in the world, but also comes home and then does construction, takes care of the family, does YouTube and all of that. I had all of this ability, and there was a lot of things that were happening, and I had a lot of power and momentum behind all of these things. And within hours, I was reduced to somebody that could barely walk in a hospital, losing my reputation. It was quite embarrassing for me. And before I knew it, I was being lifted onto an operating table and was being knocked out with gas, and went into surgery and was having a piece of my body cut out. And now I have to take time off of work. So the transition of things that were happening and the action that was just humming along, and then moving into this place where all of a sudden now there is time off of work, and now I am recovering. That is just an incredible example of Venus retrograde in the 10th, where there is some kind of reversal in fortune around daily activity, action, things at work. There's all kinds of connotations with this. Like one of the positive upsides of this is that I get to spend more time with my family because I'm home now. So Venus retrograde, getting to reconnect with people because I'm not at work. So this is one story that I'll share with you for Scorpio Rising. That is something I think was a pretty powerful delineation for Venus retrograde in the 10th house. But having that fall from grace, that connection with Venus stationing retrograde in conjunction with the fixed star Regulus, having all that momentum just sort of stripped away from me, within a matter of hours, is just phenomenal, I think. So anyway, okay, let's move on now to Sagittarius Rising. If you are a Sagittarius Rising, we'll move Sagittarius to the ascendant now. And this is placing Venus retrograde in the 9th house. The 9th house is connected to things like religion and churches and places that we travel to far away. So one thing could be that if you are Sagittarius Rising, could this be you coming back from a vacation or somewhere that you've traveled to? Could this be a reversal in study or in religious devotion? There could be themes around things turning around or changing or shifting in what you're studying, or an academic program that you're engaged in, or some kind of religious devotion that you have been holding for a long time now. There could be shifts and changes around any of those things. Changing beliefs around the power of love. Venus retrograde, I remember that song from Back to the Future. Is it Huey Lewis, I think, that the power of love? So Venus retrograde in the 9th, could there be we all have to believe in love in some way. And even if that's not romantic, the idea of how do we love other people? What is the overarching philosophy that we guide our lives towards as it relates to how we are loved? How do we believe in love? How do we ethically go about thinking about being a loving person to other people or needing love from other people? These 9th house topics could be coming in if you are a Sagittarius Rising, sort of the reevaluation around the belief in love and how we feel that we should be treated, or how maybe we should treat other people just for our own ethical standards, or something like that could be coming in if you are Sagittarius Rising. Changes in long distance relationship or past connections that come back into focus right now. So this is like the quintessential person that lives far away and they reconnect with us on social media and they come for a visit, but they live in like another city. Or it could be like, if you're in a long distance relationship, could there be shifts or changes in that relationship? Either, good or bad, but probably with Venus retrograde, it might be that there is the conversations around, I'm not sure if this is working out because we're so far away, but not to worry, because there could be a something that comes in once Venus stations and turns direct that is changing for the better as Venus heads back direct motion through the sign of Leo. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is that this initial Venus retrograde is, of course, just a temporary retrograde period that we have to go through, but it might lead to something that is connected with long-term relationships, or with people coming back that live far away, or something like that, if it has to do with a romantic thing. But it could also have to do with a return of past dreams or therapy. The ninth house is very much connected to dreams, to divination, to meditation, things like that. So we could be revisiting a dream that we've had, or maybe there's like a dream that is prominently coming back that we're having every night, and we're sort of trying to understand what that means. Or there could be forms of meditation or spirituality that we are checking out and maybe getting back to if we've previously been involved in some kind of meditative practice or something like that. Or this could be the loss of faith or academic sureness, loss in belief, or of belief in divination, or of anything that is revolving around spirituality, divination, something like that. So if you're a Sagittarius rising, this could be a time where you're unsure whether you believe in astrology, or unsure whether you buy into tarot or anything like that. Or this could be a time where sometimes you see the reverse of that, where if you have been interested in astrology or tarot or something like that, something divine in the past, that there's a return to that with Venus going retrograde. It's like you're called to sort of revisit that at this time. And maybe if you're Sag rising, maybe that's why you're watching this video right now, is because there is kind of a re-emerging interest in something in the divine arts. So that is a few things that I could see for Sagittarius rising. Now let's go ahead and put Capricorn on the ascendant. If you are a Capricorn rising, this is going to place Venus retrograde into the 8th house. So what comes to mind immediately here is, of course, the sharing of resources, and Venus retrograde in the 8th often speaks to a reversal in fortune around the resources that we depend on from other people. So it could be a partner's paycheck that we have been dependent on. And if partner goes through a hard time where they no longer have the same amount of money they used to, or something like that, then that dependent resource is temporarily lost. But this also could be where some kind of bill comes due, and it's like, we're like let's say you get married and you have a big lavish wedding. This could be the time where it's like, okay, it was a great wedding, but now you have to pay for it all, or somebody has to pay for it all, and you have to work out the finances for something like that. Sometimes with Venus retrograde in the 8th, we also are looking at matters of inheritance, or matters of state, or people passing away. From time to time, the 8th house can concretely be about somebody passing away, wills, estates, things like that. So there could be something with Capricorn rising where you're dealing with some kind of matter of estate or inheritance or death. And the 8th house also connects to anxiety. So could we just be going through a period where we have general anxiety about our relationships, or about our friendships, or about our marriage, or something like that, feeling as though the marriage is somehow dragging you down, or the relationship is dragging you down in a way that isn't positive, or or that you're about to lose the relationship because something is happening. I remember when I had a really strong 8th house transit. I think it might have been Mars in Gemini in the 8th house. I remember it just seemed hard to remain confident within my relationship. It just seemed like I was much more sensitive and worried or anxious about things working out. So sometimes the 8th house can be about anxieties that we have, resisting and rebelling against certain things that we have to accept, or something like that. So some of those themes come to mind with Venus retrograde in the 8th. This could be, of course, something simple like being denied credit if you've been trying to get a loan, or a mortgage, or something like that. And we could see themes around loss of esteem provided by those that we belong in cooperative to. So sometimes it isn't the physical resources that the eighth house is connected to. Sometimes it's the esteem of the people that we belong to, like in a cooperative. So, for instance, in a work setting or in a group setting, in any kind of context where people know us. If people know that we have a talent, or if people know us for something specific, and they might hand out our business card, or they might recommend us to another client, or something in that sense. There could be, for some reason or another, there could be the loss of esteem that we get. There could be loss of opportunities that come to us because people are recommending us to other people, or people are providing us some kind of networking or something along those lines. So those are a few themes I see for Capricorn Rising. If you are an Aquarius Rising, let's go ahead and put Aquarius on the ascendant now. For Aquarius Rising, this is moving Venus retrograde into the 7th house, the quintessential house of relationships, you might say. Could something be happening with our partner right now if we're in a marriage or partnership? Could our partner be going through some kind of reversal of fortune or some kind of setback? With the sun entering Leo right as Venus is stationing retrograde, it makes me wonder if we're in relationship, if we don't have to play the role of that supporting sun coming in and catching Venus as she falls back into retrograde motion. It makes that sort of symbolism kind of stand out to me here. So it could be that your partner may be suffering something that is challenging or difficult at this time and needs some extra support from you. It could also be having to renegotiate a contract or a deal that you thought had previously been settled. It's like a matter that has already been settled and worked out and negotiated, a contract that has been signed. This could be in anything legal, or it could be within the context of relationship or marriage. So, like say within the context of marriage, it's like you've worked out some issue or resolved something, and you feel as though something has been settled, the matter has been put to rest, and everybody knows, sort of what has been worked out. This could be a time where all of a sudden that issue resurfaces, and it's like you have to renegotiate. You have to go back to the drawing board and figure out how you can settle the matter once again. So that could be a theme that is coming up for Aquarius Rising as well. This could be also a time where you're re-entering a social situation, or something socially is changing or shifting dynamically for you, where you're going back to a group of friends, or you're entering back into a social dynamic that you have been away from for a little while. Like, for instance, my son is an Aquarius Rising, and during the Venus retrograde, he'll be going back to school. He'll be entering a new grade, but he will be re-entering back into a social situation. With Venus going retrograde in the sun's temple of Leo, Leo often has to do with authority and power. Could there be something that we have to work out within our own authority or power as we are involved in different relationships or within marriage? Could there be that dynamic of, like, say, who does this or who does that? Who wears the pants? What kind of authority or power do we have within our relationships or within our marriage or something like that? And of course, we could see things like a partner from the past coming back, of course, with Venus retrograde in the 7th, an old partner or an old friend coming back that has been away for a while. And a partner's struggle with authority in some way could also be themes that are coming up for Aquarius Rising right now. So those are some things I see for Aquarius Rising. Now let's go ahead and put Pisces on the ascendant. If you are a Pisces Rising, we are looking at Venus going retrograde in the 6th house. The 6th house was a place that is connected to obstacles, strife, conflict, accidents, injuries, health matters, sickness, disease. So not a very positive place. It was said to be the place that was the joy of Mars. So one thing that is interesting about Venus retrograde is, of course, if we are working out differences within relationships, as Venus had been traveling through the 6th house in direct motion previous to its retrograde, there may have been the ability for us to smooth out differences within our relationships or friendships. We may have been making headway towards finding some commonality with people around us. Or if this has something to do with health, we may have been working towards improving our health or having a really healthy lifestyle at this time that has been requiring a lot of work. And it's like we make some headway towards that. Or if there is a project that we've been working on creatively, this could be a time where we see setbacks or reversals of fortune in any of those particular ways. So whether that's having to face obstacles in relationships where it seems like differences are cropping up now and it's difficult to overcome them. And it's like, how do we find common ground? I'm not sure that we can, and we sort of have to face things like that within relationships, perhaps. Or like, say, if there's a falling away of you sticking with a health regimen or doing something healthy for yourself, this could be a time where it's somehow more difficult, or there's something that comes up that keeps you from being able to maintain that health regimen. And there could be signatures of going through sickness or dealing with health matters. And this could also be just obstacles being introduced in something that you've been working really hard on. So it could be now that we're meant to face certain things that we have to overcome for things to work out smoothly in a project that requires a lot of hard work or effort. One thing that's helpful to remember, though, is that what we do right now with Venus retrograde in the 6th is really just paving the way for Venus's station to go direct again through Leo after September. So I think it's really helpful when we talk about Venus retrograde in the 6th house, a place that is kind of a difficult place to have a retrograde planet, is just that, you know, these are just temporary setbacks. And as Venus is promised at some point to return to direct motion and provide that return of harmony or return of something going smooth within difficult circumstances or hard work or whatever within health, there is eventually the showing up of something positive that comes out of maybe facing a challenge or obstacle or difficulty at this time right now. One thing that I do want to bring up, though, is that with Venus going retrograde in a sign like Leo, a sign that likes to show off, and the combination of the 6th house said to be the joy of Mars, if you are showing other people what you can do, this might be a time where you sustain an accident or injury. So you want to be careful if you're showing off doing something, physical that is potentially dangerous or risky. That is something to watch out for. It's probably kind of an extreme example of something that could happen with Venus going retrograde in the 6th house, but there's just a proneness to accidents or injuries, accidents to relationships, accidents to us while working hard on projects that require something physical or laborious that we're doing. So you just want to be careful of hurting yourself or getting any kind of injury, but especially if you're doing something risky, if you're going out on a limb, if you're sort of showing people what you can do. It's like, look at me, I can do this thing, I can balance on the high wire, and before you know it, you're falling off and you're having to now go through some kind of recovery of some sort. So you want to watch out for things like that if you're Pisces rising. Okay, well, that's what I have for all 12 rising signs. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. I hope you guys have enjoyed this and got something useful out of this. Please feel free to leave me any comments, whether some of this is feeling like it resonates with you or whether you're seeing a different way that Venus is starting to show up for you based on your rising sign. That is always something fun you can leave in the comment section that we can all partake in and enjoy learning about. I appreciate you guys watching. I'll be back again next Monday with another astrology video, and I hope you have a great week and take care. Bye for now.